Mafia Unveiled, the John and Gene Show. We're back again, and today's a really good show because of who I'm going to talk about. Everybody hears everybody talking about Angelo Quack Rogerio. We just did a segment on his son, Junior Rogerio, and some jail stories, fights, and the reality of what happened in his life as a made guy. And today we're going to talk about one of his uncles, his father's younger brother, Sally. And Sally was a precursor of the French Connection and the heroin trade, a pizza connection in the United States. Yeah. Sally is one of the biggest movers of heroin across the world.
No, actually, they labeled him the biggest drug dealer for Mafia ever. They labeled him the biggest drug dealer for the organized crime. That's what he was labeled at one time. Yes.
Geraldo Schiaschi, I don't know how to say his last name, right, was his supplier.
Right.
And he was flying back and forth tons of heroin throughout this country. He was also a big customer of the boss of Canada, Rizzuto. So Sally knew his way around. He didn't have the interest to be that type of guy hanging around with the mafia types. And although his brother was a tough gangster, he wanted to be that businessman. He owned everything. He started buying up things. And actually, before he died, he was flying to Orlando in a four-passenger jet with the pilot, co-pilot, and his wife.
Yeah, I know. I know his son very well. Yeah. Son is a great.
I know Jamie since he's a kid. The daughter Danielle.
I know he's
nice kids.
I know he's upset about. He's very close to Ronnie G and Richie Boy, but personally, I knew him not great, but pretty well, and he had a heart of gold. He would do anything for anybody. That's all I could say about him. Legitimately, anything.
Well, they're good. Listen, that whole family were good people.
Yeah.
To say the truth, and I know them since they're literally babies.
Right.
And they were around, and I go to Angelo's mother's house, and they, the kids grew up there, so they were always at the house with me when I was there when they were children.
If it wasn't for him, Bobby G. Alonzo's older brother, Richie Boy, who's a complete mutt, he literally bought him his home, took care of him, did everything for this guy. I mean, literally. So, I watch this guy take care of people and literally make them have things. So I have to say nothing but good things about Jamie. Good-hearted person. Very good.
So when Sally stood under the radar as far as the Gambino family, he knew everybody didn't hang around the clubs. He obviously got embedded with Michael Corio, the attorney that got involved in the heroin trade business, Jeannie Gotti, and Johnny Canigo ends up getting 50 years on their case. He was also very good friends with Mark Ryder, who a lot of people, if you don't know who he is, he's got a life sentence, and he just put an appeal in trying to get out at his age for being sick, and they ruled against him, the prosecutor, saying that he's a danger to society. Now, I know the guy very well. I was very good friends with his son, and his son's body was never found, and he was killed. Yeah. And Mark should be home. And, I've been advocating for this stuff.
Tommy Karate killed the son, right?
Well, I believe Tommy Karate wasn't formally charged with. I believe Tommy Karate and Chris Tarantino were the ones that killed him, and they dismembered his body. And, if you get into that case, the stolen van was actually taken from Brooklyn.
I know you know this. Didn't they blame someone for killing him and kill the guy in jail?
Another guy actually got hit with a shot.
Right.
He was in a meeting. He went to a pen, and then the Aryan brothers killed him at the pen, supposedly at the behest as a favor to Mark. And he's one of the guys that was involved in setting up, because they used to do the crash and carry. Greg, at the time, he had a problem with Tommy Karate. He called me up. We met about it. So I believe that Chris is the one that pulled it off. I don't know if Tommy was exactly there.
Right.
But Tommy was behind it, in my opinion. But going back to Sal, Sal started doing business with Mark. Mark did business with Herbie Sperling and a ton of guys that were moving heroin throughout this country in big manner. And these guys were very intelligent, wealthy businessmen. When Mark went on a run, I went with his son. We took him to Disney World originally because Mark took off on his case. And the Gambino family was contemplating killing Mark. They didn't know if they could trust him. So that, again, back to loyalty, they were going to hit him. Mark obviously didn't talk. And from there, we went to California, me and him and a woman friend of mine. Went on a plane, so we had cover as a family. She went on basically as his wife, and I went on as being his son. And we flew to Santa Barbara California, and we had a house for him on the beach there, and he was laying low at that time. At this time, going back in time now, Sally is already gone. But Sally's the one that really set this stuff up. And years early, while Sally was doing business with Mark was arrested years before this, and the famous Nicky Barnes from Harlem was one of the guys that testified against Mark. So that heroin trade went from Rizzuto, the boss of Canada, to Harlem with Nicky Barnes and that crew of guys that testified against Mark, and it goes into Italy and Europe, and they're moving, truckloads, plane loads, boat loads of heroin distributed all through New York City. Now, when Sally gets in trouble and he's on the run, but Sally, when he dies, for people that don't know, Sally was on the run for 6 years. The government was looking for him. But he had houses in the Poconos. He had houses in Florida. He had houses in Jersey.
He's like a drug kingpin.
Yeah, and very low-keyed so people, he loved his wife. He was always with his wife. They traveled together constantly. They moved around together constantly. He was almost like a hipster kind of cool, hangout, money-making guy and he had visions because he was flying to Disney World to actually buy the franchise McDonald's throughout Disney World. So he was way ahead of his time.
They said he's worth, honestly, we grew up in Howard Beach, so I know they said he's worth $100 million in the 80s. That's like $1 billion. It's like $1 billion today. So I'm being honest with you, that's literally what they said he had. That's how much money they said this man had.
He had cargo companies.
Yeah.
He had different companies that, back then the Fatico brothers would look the other way and say the boatloads of money they were getting and Carlo Gambino was getting was actually money that was legitimate money from the shipping industry, the cargo industry. Right. Meanwhile, we all know it was coming from the heroin business.
Right.
That he was running, which he brought his brother Angelo in, and he brought Johnny in, and he brought the lawyer Michael Corio, and he brought a lot of other guys in. I'm just giving you a handful of names that Sally was moving around with. And he wasn't a club guy. He wouldn't come around the club. And this is way before, the Pizza Connection, so he was way ahead of his time, like I said. So when he brought in guys like Mark Ryder, sharp guy, Mark was a sharp guy. So people that don't know who he is, he's a very sharp guy, 6'4", 6'5", athletic, fancy dresser, moved around, and him and Sally were best friends. And, I'm going to go back to a case with Mark now. He put in for an appeal, the prosecutor saying he's dangerous. You can't let other guys out with dozens of murders and not let this guy on appeal with, and this is the problem with the justice system. He's sickly, he's older, elderly, he wasn't a killer. They accused him of a couple murders I know on his case. There was a woman that got involved in the case that testified. There was Jackson out of the Bronx that was involved also that testified that, Mark never had any bad words to say, was just trying to get the guy to tell the truth and recanted some of his testimony at the time. But at this age, I'm not sure why this government seems that they want to watch people slowly dying there. Right. He's already had enough suffering when he lost his son. And Sally had a bad death by that plane accident. I believe it was in Georgia. It was the last time they heard communication. They told them to lower altitude, I believe, from about 400. It
was a private plane, though.
Yeah, they wanted them to lower 10,000 feet.
A lot. And it was a private jet. Most plane crashes come from smaller planes. I'm just letting you know.
But that communication, the weather was clear. There was no trouble. The plane was well maintained. So it's, they have communication, and they lost communication after they told them to lower 10,000 feet. And they found them in the ocean the next day. The first day they didn't find them. The next day they did, but the one pilot, I believe it was a woman, they never found her. And, the history behind that, a lot of people don't know when you're hearing about this mob talk. This is one of the most extraordinary guys in the mob that wasn't a made man, is again talking about an associate that probably had more power than some of the bosses in the mob. And he was a very low-key guy and a family guy. So there was a difference about the way you depict a mobster compared to the way you would depict somebody like him. And he was just a happy-go-lucky guy in a bad industry. Obviously, we're not telling the people to go out and get into that industry, but this is the world we're talking about on these shows.
He supplied 80% of the five boroughs with heroin at one point.
Everybody through all five families were
80%.
directly, indirectly dealing with
He
him.
was
Guys
even the
like
hoods. No, he was supplying even Nicky. I think it was even the Nicky Barnes.
yeah, all of them. Nicky
All of
was
them.
Nicky was being
Yeah.
supplied through Mark Ryder, and that's through Sally.
Yeah, that was.
And when Nicky testifies later on, he testifies against Mark. Mark beats most of those charges. I
Right.
believe he only did 6 or 8 years on that case. And then when he comes home on this next case, it was his old cellmate that ends up setting him up that he was in California. And he was a good friend actually at that time with the Burke family, and he knew me and Franklin pretty good. And he sets up where Mark's at. Actually, I never trusted him, so I used to tell Mark, don't call him anymore.
Right.
I forget his name off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But he was his cellmate for 6 years, so Mark took a liking to him, which he ends up setting Mark up.
Yeah.
But for the people that want to know or you want to write in about and ask questions about Mark, Sal, and the downfall of their little group of gangsters in the drug trade. But in my opinion, again, I don't know where that prosecutor's getting at about Mark. But Mark wasn't a violent, dangerous. He wasn't out there killing guys.
Right, that's the rep that he had, though. They got that rep. I don't know why.
Well, because when you have all your co-defendants involved in a case, and there's a murder here or there, they exaggerate the extent.
Right.
Because I believe on his case, I think they call it an 848 he was charged with. I think that's the number. I could be wrong, but
Kingpin status?
it's kingpin status
Yeah,
with drugs where you don't have any ability you have no ability to get out on any kind of appeals.
That's kingpin status. Pretty sure,
And he did run a big, huge community of black community in the Bronx, in Harlem. I believe that woman's name that testified was Hilda. I believe that was her.
Yeah. You know how the feds are. If you're not helping them, you're not going there. They fight you.
But the guy's in his 80s now and he's sick, and there's no reason to keep him in.
Nah, but they denied Vic Arena.
And he didn't kill anybody by his own hand. And if there was, I believe there was only 2 murders on that indictment on Mark's case.
He looks like he's got one. He's pretty much dead. They won't
Vic was involved with gas pipe in a slew of murders.
No, I know. I'm just saying.
And Mark wasn't. Mark wasn't involved in these slew of murders.
Yeah.
Mark was, and neither was Sally. These guys were, jet-setting playboys and selling drugs.
Right.
I mean, we're like the rest of the world selling drugs. And but I just don't see, we'll go talk about Oscar Lugo. I'm going to bring him in along with this. This is another guy, got 440 years. And I've been trying to help him to get out, and he's wrongfully convicted. And, even if he was convicted, his sentence should be 12, 15 years. He's in over 20 years now. So these are some major drug cases that, somebody in law enforcement, governors, the president, well, I don't know, the president doesn't know he's alive still, should be looking at these cases.
Right.
And if you're talking about reform of our system, these are some of the cases that should be reformed. So I talk about them. And I'm going to read a case again for Benny Gerentano. A lot of people know who it is. On the next segment, I'm going to read what he wrote me from prison recently.
Yeah.
And you determine what's fiction or what's facts or fiction. Thank you, everybody. Don't forget to hit subscribe. You want to hear more about Sally Rogerio, let us know. Keep writing in. We like that you ask these questions. And I'm doing this segment because somebody wrote in about Sally Rogerio.
Right. If you want to follow us on our Instagram, Gene Borello, Johnny Alite, you see our books. You can order them on any website. Johnny got his baseball bat back.
Clothing's back. The sheephead shirts.
Yes.
If you want a sheephead jacket, you see me wearing it. Hats, shirts. They're embroidered. My name's on it. And we get the photos of us together. Events, we show up together. Lectures. Right. So if anybody's interested, anybody wants to sponsor us, also contact us. Contact us through our emails.
Or Instagram.
Or Instagram. And, these stories will keep coming. And, also remember, we're not advocating for the street. We're against the street.
Right.
This is stories from the past that people are interested in. And we hope you enjoy the stories that we're telling. And we'll continue with it.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody.